The Torah says in Sefer Shmot, Perek Yud Chet, Perek Yud Bet, Pasuk Chet, Ba'erev tochlu matzot. This is referring to the night of the 15th of Nisan. And then the Torah goes on to say, Al matzot u'morim yochlu, which means that we have to eat the Korban Pesach together with matzot u'maror. So the Gemara raises the question, so what is it? Is the mitzvah to eat the matzah? Is it the mitzvah to eat the matzah with the Pesach, the kricha? And the Gemara comes to the conclusion in Zichron DOV Kuf Chav that we have actually two mitzvot, two separate mitzvahs. We have the mitzvah of achilas matzah, and that's a mitzvah of an achilah per se. It's not connected to the Korban Pesach. And we have another mitzvah of eating the Pesach accompanied by the matzah. And I'd like to mention a few differences that the Gemara points out between the two. When it comes to the mitzvah of eating the Pesach accompanied with matzah, quite clearly, if you don't have a Pesach, you don't have the matzah. So you can't fulfill the mitzvah of al matzos and morim yachlu. Therefore, Bizman Hazeh, we're hoping between now, we still have almost 2 weeks, the Beit Midrash will be restored. But until then, if we don't have the Beit Midrash, we don't have the Korban Pesach, then the mitzvah of eating matzah accompanying the Korban Pesach is completely suspended. But nevertheless, there's still a mitzvah in our Torah, even in our time, even without the Beit Midrash, to eat the matzah. That's a biblical requirement, a mitzvah d'oraisa, and it's derived from the pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzos, which sets up the mitzvah of matzah as an independent mitzvah unto itself. Therefore, the Gemara entertains the following question. There are many categories of individuals who are exempt from the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. And what's their status with regard to the mitzvah of matzah? For example, an orel, someone who's not circumcised. A ben nechar is someone who violates the Torah flagrantly. He's what's called a mumar. He's an apostate as far as we're concerned. If he was a mumar at the time of the shchitas ha-pesach, where the Pesach was slaughtered, even if he does tshuva in the meantime, he's already excluded from the Korban Pesach. Or, for example, you have a tameh, someone who's defiled, he's contaminated, or someone who's b'derech rechoka, he's far away from the Beit Midrash. All these categories of individuals are exempt from the Korban Pesach. What's their din as far as the mitzvah of matzah is concerned? So the Gemara comes to the conclusion that since the Torah went out of its way to formulate a separate independent mitzvah of achilas matzah under the pasuk ba'erev tochlu matzos, therefore all these categories of people are included in the mitzvah of matzah. So there's no difference between a tameh and a tahar, no difference between a ben nechar and orel. Everyone is obligated in the mitzvah of achilas matzah under the category of ba'erev tochlu matzos. What about women? So if I were to ask you the question of mitzvahs aseishas man grama, this is a classical case of a time-bound mitzvah, is it not? The mitzvah is obligatory on the 15th of Nisan, one night out of the entire year. So if women are exempt from shofar and lulav and sukkah and the like, they should be likewise exempt from the mitzvah of eating matzah. And the Gemara says no, the women can't get away with it. They too have the obligation to eat matzah, and hopefully they'll get some rest on their Pesach. That's a fantasy, but they'll be up long enough so that they can eat the matzah with a lot of fervent gusto. We'll see exactly how to do that in Mitzvah Shem in the time allotted to us. But be that as it may, why are women obligated in the mitzvah of matzah? What happens to Zman Grama, to the time-bound mitzvah? So the Gemara quotes a pasuk, and the pasuk says, Lo sochlu of chametz, shivas yomim tochlu matzah. You shall not eat chametz for a full 7 days, and you shall eat matzah. And the Gemara says the following: Kol shen muzhar, anyone who's included under the azhara, under the law, which enjoins us from eating chametz, is yeshno b'chal kumasei matzah. He's included in the mitzvah saseh, the positive command of eating matzah. So therefore the Gemara says the following: since women are included in the Val Tochal Chametz, they're enjoined from eating chametz, and since the Torah is equated chametz with matzah, the flip sides of the same coin, In fact, we'll soon see in Brit that the only matzah you're allowed to use for the mitzvah of matzah is matzah that could become chametz if it would allow to ferment. We arrest the process of fermentation, that's how we generate matzah, but it's got to be something that's included in the possibility of becoming chametz. Therefore, for example, rice matzahs are excluded because you can't make chametz out of rice. If you let rice, to chop it up, make a rice flour and add water, all you'll get at the end, the Gemara says, is sirachon. It's not really chimutz, and therefore can't be used for matzah. But on the flip side, anything that's included, in this case, any person that's included in the prohibition in joining us from eating chametz is therefore included in the positive command of eating matzah. Women are included in all lavim, in all these surim in the Torah, and certainly in the case of chametz, and therefore, ipso facto, they're included in the mitzvah of matzah. So let's just summarize what we've said until now. But erev tofu matzahs sets itself as a mitzvah d'oraisa even in our time. Despite the fact that elsewhere the Torah combines the mitzvah of matzah, links it with Pesach. And therefore in our time we would think that maybe the matzah is only a zecher, some sort of remembrance of what existed in bygone years. No. But Erev Tofu Matzah says that matzah is independent of Korban Pesach. It sets itself up as its own category, its own chiyuv mitzvah d'oraisa. And all the Pturim, all those who are exempt from Korban Pesach are nevertheless obligated to eat the matzah. And we concluded that women are obligated to eat matzah because matzah is connected to what? To chametz, since women are included in the lav of chametz, therefore they're included in the mitzvah of matzah. When does the mitzvah of matzah apply? So this question takes on many different facets. Let me focus on the most fundamental of them all. The night of Tesla, the Seder night. But yet the Torah says Shivas Yomim tofu matzahs. The Torah says we have to eat matzah 7 days. Anybody want to try to reconcile that? How do we reconcile the fact that the mitzvah of matzah is on the first night, we have to eat matzah, and yet the Torah itself describes matzah for 7 days? Can anybody help us with that? Where else do we find that the Torah speaks about the first night and all 7 days? On Sukkah is correct. The mitzvah of Sukkah, you said it? The mitzvah of Sukkah applies to all 7 days. The Shivas Yom Teshuvah Sukkahs. But yet, the Gemara says that the first night is a chiyuv. Why? Because in the case of matzah, the Torah says ba'erev tofu matzahs. It means in that night, the first night of Pesach, we have to eat matzah. What do we do with the other days? So maybe the Torah means nothing more than to tell us that on the other days you have to eat matzah, meaning non-chametz. The flip side of chametz is matzah. Not that you're obligated to eat matzah. The Torah says ba'erev tofu matzah, only on the first night. So what does it mean to say Shivas Yomim tofu matzahs? It means eat something. Oh, can't move too far. He said, eat something that's what? That's not chametz, but I don't have an obligation to eat matzah, so let's say I want to go through all 7 days, and only on the first night am I obligated to eat matzah, so do I have to eat matzah the whole of Pesach? No, I only have to eat matzah when? The first night, because of the Erev, tofu matzahs. Comes along the Chizkuni in his Pirush al Torah. The Ibn Ezra also seems to go on this line, and the Gra accepts this halacha, that there's a mitzvah to eat matzah all 7 days. Pretty radical. But yes, that's a simple pshat in the pasuk. The pasuk says Shivas Yomim. Says the Gaon, there's no obligation to eat matzah all 7 days. The obligation, the absolute compulsory requirement is only on the first night. But if you eat matzah the rest of the Chag, you'll get a mitzvah for it. There are 2 categories of mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah chiyuvis and a mitzvah kiyuvis. There's an obligatory mitzvah, and then there's a voluntary mitzvah. A voluntary mitzvah allows you to perform the mitzvah, and if you do so, you get schar, you get rewarded for it. So I suggest that we eat matzah all 7 days. Why not? Let's get the kiyum of matzah all 7 days. The only question is, I wouldn't make the bracha asher kidshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al achilas matzah except on the first night. Even though you'll ask me, of course, the famous question on the Gaon. They all ask if the Gaon is correct that there's a mitzvah to eat matzah all 7 days. Why don't we recite a bracha all 7 days? So you'll tell me we don't make a bracha on a mitzvah kiyumis? But what about Sukkah? For 7 days we recite a bracha on the sukkah whenever we go in and eat a meal. It's not obligatory. So you see that we do make a bracha even on a mitzvah that's voluntary. What's the difference between sukkah and matzah? Very difficult question on the go. But one thing I want to gain from this go. First of all, I want to gain a lot of mitzvahs. That's always a good thing to have. What to do with all the carbs and everything that we'll have to deal with is a separate question. If you're constantly eating matzah for 7 days, and we might have to refer to some of the gastro people to help us figure out how to digest matzah for 7 days. But be that as it may, I just want to point out one thing which is very important. That not only do we gain from the Gaon a lot of mitzvahs, and that's always a good thing, it's even more than that. My father, Zichron DOV, once asked me a question, and it was a very, very fundamental question. Some of you here in the audience maybe heard of this. This is a concept that appears all over Moed in Shabbos, and that's called Zichron DOV. For example, who can tell me what happens if the first day of Rosh Hashanah coincides with Shabbos? Do we blow the shofar or not? Anybody? No shofar. What happened to the mitzvah shofar? First day of Sukkot is on Shabbat. Do we shake the lulav? We don't shake the lulav. If Purim coincides with Shabbat, we don't read the Megillah. So in all these cases, we have something called Zichron DOV. Rav is worried about the fact that you may take the object of the mitzvah to a baki, to an expert, and ask him details, and in so doing, you might inadvertently carry it from one domain to the other. And on Shabbos, that's a malacha d'oraisa v'otzah. So my father asked me the question, what happens if the first day of Pesach coincides with Shabbos? Anybody know? Do we eat the matzah? We do eat the matzah. Why not? What happens in Zichron DOV? There are all sorts of complicated questions. Today, my friends, life is easy. You buy the matzahs from your favorite hashgacha, whatever your favorite hashgacha is. You know, if you're Chassidish, maybe you get Belzer matzahs or Satmar matzahs. You know, if you want, I don't know, the other OU matzahs here in this country. We don't get them in Israel, but yeah. So whatever your kashrus is, the Vod of Canada. So you don't have to worry. You can say the matzah is perfect. But there was a time when it wasn't so institutionalized, and you had many issues with matzahs. For example, a matzah that has a bubble on it, there's a whole sugya. You have to be a bakio, for example, if sometimes there's cracks in the matzah in certain ways or folds in the matzah. You really have to take the matzah to a baki. And in fact, 100 years ago, and certainly before that, Rabbanim used to have the doors of their Seder night open, not just because called Dichman Yeshiva University to invite the guests, but because people would come around to ask questions about the matzah. They would show them a matzah and ask them if this is coming to a matzah. Especially amongst the Sfaradim who have the very thick matzahs, these questions come up all the time. What happened to Zichron DOV? So I wanted to tell my father, I wanted to suggest an answer based on the Gaon. The Gaon says that there's a mitzvah of eating matzah not just on the first night, but all 7 days. It reflects beautifully in the name of the holiday. The Torah calls this holiday Chag HaMatzot Hazeh. Sukkot is not called Chag HaLulav Hazeh, and Rosh Hashanah is not called Chag HaShofar Hazeh. Why does the Torah use the appellation Chag HaMatzot Hazeh? And the answer, I believe, is that matzah defies the very sanctity of the day. Every holiday has its own Kedushas Hayom. The Kedushas Hayom, the sanctity of the day of Pesach, is integrated, is identified with matzah. Zichron DOV couldn't possibly apply here. If Rabbah were to suspend the mitzvah of matzah, he would be nullifying and undermining the very Kedushas Hayom of Pesach. There's no Pesach holiday without being Chag HaMatzos. And the proof of the pudding is the Gaon. Because whereas in the case of lulav, I take the lulav on the first day and that's it. After the first day, lulav is over. In the case of shofar, I blow the shofar at daytime, but not at night. But in the case of matzah, there's a mitzvah of matzah that begins with the first night and continues non-stop until the end of the holiday. And why is that so? Because there couldn't be a Kedushas Hayom, a sanctity of the day, without matzah. I think the Gaon will help us with a few other things. You can see I'm a big fan of this Chiddush of the Gaon. The Sfaradim, the whole year round, anybody know what bracha they make if you eat matzah the whole year round, not on Pesach? Do we have any Sephardic people in the audience who know? They don't make hamotzi lechem min haaretz on matzah. They make borei minei mizonot. And yet on Pesach, because of the mitzvah of eating matzah, which gives it special chashivus, they recite a bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz on matzah. But the question arises, nicha the first night, I understand very well. But what about the rest of Pesach? Shouldn't they avert back to the old custom the whole year round of saying borei minei mizonos? The answer is the good. Based on the Chizkuni, the Rishonim, that there's a mitzvah of matzah all 7 days, albeit not as a compulsory mitzvah, but at least as a voluntary mitzvah. So every time I eat matzah for all 7 days, it's elevated, it's upgraded to the status of a mitzvah. And therefore I make the bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And I saw in Shulchan Aruch that the afikoman has to be eaten by chatzot. I don't know when chatzot is this year. We can check it out on the calendar, but sometime around midnight, that's the due date. That's you gotta eat the matzah and the afikoman before.
And I don't know what day like that.
Yeah, do you know what it is? I don't exactly what it is. 12 and change.
123 or so.
Oh, because we added it now. So 123. So what happens again? I don't know if anyone's going to be up that late with their seder and they haven't eaten the afikoman yet. But Luyitzer, would you eat the afikoman after that time, after chatzos? Normally, I would say it doesn't make any sense to have a zecher to a mitzvah of matzah that existed at the time of the Korban Pesach when it's after chatzos. If chatzos is gone, then the mitzvah of matzah is also gone. But the answer is, according to the Gaon, there's a mitzvah of matzah that extends beyond chatzos. Therefore, again, I would be very meticulous in demanding that we eat the afikoman before chatzos. But in the worst case scenario, you would not be an ignoramus and amoretz if you ate the afikoman after chatzos, because it still retains the status of a mitzvah because of the Gaon's chiddush that all 7 days is a mitzvah. I was wondering, according to the Vilna Gaon, what matzah should I take past the first night? We have 2 categories of matzah. We have what's called shmura matzah, because the Torah says shmartem es matzos. These matzahs are made specifically for the sake of a mitzvah, the mitzvah of matzah. And then we have what's called pshutos. We know they're not chametz, but they don't have the shmira. They're not shmura matzahs. Would there be a mitzvah, kol shiva, to require shmura matzah? And I would say no. That from the Gaon's perspective, that there's a kiyum, there's a mitzvah fulfilled all shiva of eating matzah, it need not be shmura matzah. Shmura matzah means ushmartem es hamatzahs for that unique mitzvah of ba'erev toflu matzahs. But as far as the other 7 days is concerned, where the Torah never made it compulsory to eat matzah, you don't have the concept of shmura matzah. Therefore, matzah's pshutos would be just as good as matzah shmura. If this be the case, we gain something tremendously. Not only do we have 7 days of a mitzvah, constant mitzvah to eat matzah, on top of it, we don't even have to eat shmura matzah. We can get that kiyum even without shmura. L'maisa, the Gaon says we should use shmura matzah kol shiva, but for an entirely different reason. The Gaon says that we should eat shmura matzah all 7 days because shmura matzah has been watched and supervised more meticulously, that it shouldn't come to chimutz, it shouldn't be chametz. So that's an entirely different reason. You might opt and prefer shmura matzah simply on the level of avoiding chametz, but it's not integral to the mitzvah of matzah itself. How much matzah do we have to eat? It says in Shulchan Aruch we have to eat a kizayis. It's based on the halacha that ein achila pachos mikizayis. Anywhere in the Torah requires achila. A ma'isa achila requires a kizayis. Barest minimum. Although it could be for birkas hamazon, you have to eat more than a kizayis, but that's because the Torah says v'achalta v'savato berakta. The Torah adds another condition for the chiyuv bracha of birkas hamazon. It has to be severe, and that's called kibetz. But as far as basic achila is concerned, you need a kizayis. Now there are differences of opinion how much a kizayis is in the case of matzah. It all depends whether you have to crush it up or this and that. Usually we assume a half a matzah is a kizayis. Some say very strict that you need 2/3 of a matzah. But here I want to share with you a top. The Taz in Shulchan Aruch has a chiddush, and it seems that the custom is to follow the Taz. This is in Siman Tov Ayin Hey, for anyone who wants to look it up. That we have to swallow the entire kezayis in one fell swoop. We should not be eating the kezayis slowly, piecemeal, but rather bevasachas. So again, when the theme of tonight's discussion is how to eat matzah and survive it, then we really have to introduce the Taz. It gets even more complicated, because not only do you have to eat the entire kezayis with one swallowing, as you chew and you chew and chew, and then you swallow, you gulp down the kezayis, and God help us. But on top of that, you've got to eat two kezayis, because the halach of the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you need one kezayis for what's called the matzah shlema, the complete matzah. So you break that one in half after you made the hamotzi lechem min aretz. Why do we need a shlema? For two reasons. First of all, every hamotzi lechem min aretz should be made on a full bread. That's a general halach in Birkas Hanenim. On top of that, you need it for lechem mishnah. We'll see. There's a whole discussion with there's a mitzvah of lechem mishnah this night. But let's assume, like those poskim, that there is a mitzvah of lechem mishnah. So I got to eat the top matzah. I need a kezayis to be makayim the din of lechem mishnah. And then the broken matzah, the yachatz matzah, the prusa, that I need for the mitzvah of matzahs. We'll soon see. So I need a kezayis from here and a kezayis from there. So I would say take a deep breath and first eat your first kezayis, and then eat your second kezayis. And try to swallow it, one kezayis here and one kezayis there, but not to stretch it out. Now, if you do stretch it out, okay, it's not the best way of doing it. The Taz wouldn't be so thrilled, he wouldn't give you so many brownie points, but you certainly don't see the mitzvah, but with one condition. It's got to all be toch kedei achilas pras. If you eat part of a kezayis at one time, and then you wait 4 minutes, 5 minutes, again, there are very shittas about what kedei achilas pras is, and then you eat the second half of the zayis, that certainly is not enough according to anybody. So even if you don't want to accept the Taz, whose opinion is brought down in the Mishnah Berurah, that you have to eat the entire kezayis at one time in masachas with one bliya, even if you put aside the Taz, you definitely have to eat the entire kezayis within a short period of time. Don't stretch it out. That's what I wanted to share with you. Now, we spoke about before, what are the time periods within which we have to eat the matzah? Well, Yachol Mibod Yom, I might think that if it's daylight out, because now we're getting to the point here where it's getting dark pretty late, so you might, especially on a Seder night, you want to get everyone involved and the children, and you don't want to start too late. I might think that you can eat the matzah Mibod Yom, but wait a minute, I don't get it. What does that mean, Mibod Yom? Isn't that the 14th of Nisan? The mitzvah is on the 15th of Nisan. What's the answer? What would be a situation in which I can eat the matzah? Technically, it's the 14th of Nisan, but it's still ba'er tofu matzahs. What's that called? Like in the summertime when we daven early. You remember we come back and we make kiddush on a Friday night early. It's still light out. What's that called? I can't hear you, guys. Say it louder. Tosefes. So would Tosefes, when I accept upon myself the Kedushas Hayom a little bit earlier, and it's still light out, would that generate a chiyuv matzah? The answer is not. And why not?
You have to wait till night.
Why do you have to wait till night? Excellent. Because of the equation to Korban Pesach. In Korban Pesach it says, V'achlu es ha-basar b'layla. It's got to be Laila. Tosefes Shabbos generates Kedushas Hayom, but it doesn't change day into night. We don't have the power to change day into night. Therefore, the Gemara has a hekesh, an equation between Pesach and Matzah. Pesach could only be eaten by Laila because the Torah specifies Laila. Laila is only after Tzeit HaKochavim. And since Matzah is equated with Korban Pesach, al Matzah sumerom yochlu, referring to the Pesach. Therefore, just like Pesach has to be eaten at night, you need Vadai Laila. You can't generate a mitzvah v'yachlos abos v'laila based on Kabbalah's Kedushas Hayom, Tosefes Hayom. So to Matzah, you have to wait till night. This leads us to a whole different discussion, which is not for tonight, about Dalet Kosos. What's the first of the 4 Kosos? Kiddush. So on the one hand, I normally make Kiddush on any Yom Tov or any Shabbos through Tosefes, even though it's Bod Yom, it's still light out. But the Trumas Hadeshim says with regard to Kiddush, on this night of Pesach, we got to wait till Vadei Laila. You can't kick off the Seder with a Kiddush before it's Vadai Laila. 8:30 on this clock. That's the latest hour to start Kaddish, but that's what we got to do. And why, says the Trumas Hadeshin? Because Kiddush is also the first of the Dalit Kosos. And insofar as it's part of the Dalit Kosos, it's equated in this whole Cholin together with, I don't know if the Cholin has Kiddu in it, that we have to hear from Rabbi Tachina, but together with this whole Cholin of Matzah, which has to be Vadai Laila, and Korban Pesach has to be Vadai Laila, and therefore Kiddush, insofar as it's the first of the 4 cups of wine, has to be Vadai Laila. I always wondered, what would the Trumas Hadeshin say about a smart aleck who would recite Kiddush a minute before Tzeis HaKochavim, finish his Kiddush with Tzeis HaKochavim simultaneously, and then drink the wine? That's an interesting question. Because insofar as I'm fulfilling the mitzvah of Kiddush, that I can do Mibod Yom until Sefer Shabbos, till Sefer Yom. Insofar as it's the first of the Dalit Kosos, I got to drink the Kos when it's Laila. I was Yotzei Bo. I recited Kiddush before Tzeis. That's fine. It's after till Sefer Yom. On the other hand, I drank the Kos after Laila. That's an interesting question that has to be handled. And when is the latest time to eat the matzah? So there's a machlokus in the Gemara between Rav Azarya. Oh, I love his father's first name. And the Chachamim about when is the latest time to eat the Korban Pesach. According to Rav Azarya, it's got to be the time in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the Bechoros on that night, Balaylahu. Just like that took place by Chatzos, so too the Korban Pesach has to be eaten by Chatzos. So when we read the pasuk V'yochel it's a pasuk Balayla, I said according to Rav Azarya, Balayla said means up to Chatzos and not beyond. So too matzah, as we said before, which is equated to Korban Pesach, has to be eaten before Chatzos. The Chachamim disagree. Rabbi Akiva holds no, you can eat the Korban Pesach throughout the entire night up till daybreak because it's a mitzvah Shabbalayla. He doesn't have this equation with the pasuk of Balayla Bavur Zeh, when I take the out of when I destroy the Bechoros. How do we paskin? So in Shulchan Aruch, it's very interesting. The Rambam paskins, like Rabbi Akiva, that the Korban Pesach could be eaten the entire night. But the Shulchan Aruch here in Hilchos Matzah paskins that the matzah has to be eaten by Chatzos. So it's fascinating to me that the sheet of Rav Azarya apparently was accepted, and therefore we have to be very meticulous. Again, to start the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah when it's Vadai nightfall, Laila, not before with Tosefes, and we have to finish it by Chatzos. Here's a fascinating question for you. I don't know if you've ever thought about this. We have a matzah that we eat at the beginning of the Seder. Not at the very beginning, we've got to go through Magid, that takes a while. And then we have a matzah that we eat at the end of the Seder. What's that called? Afikoman. Which matzah is the matzah of Ba'erev Tochel Matzahs? Which matzah is the matzah that I eat to fulfill my obligation every year to eat a Kazayas matzah? This is a gigantic machlokas. According to Rashi and the Rashbam and the Mordechai, it is the last matzah that we eat for Afikoman, which is the matzah's mitzvah. And the reason for that is because we always have an equation between matzah and Korban Pesach, and Korban Pesach was eaten at the end of the meal. The reason for that is because there's a special halach in Korban Pesach of ala sova. You have to eat the Korban Pesach at the end of the meal to reach the state of satiation. Let's not go too far. Again, the gastro people are going to get us. If we're already completely satiated and then we eat the Korban Pesach, that's not a good thing. That's called like achila gasa. But to carry us over the threshold, it's the kizayis b'sara Pesach that terminates the meal. Afikoman is a word that comes from the Greek and it means the dessert. The dessert, the final part of our meal, has to be the Korban Pesach. That's fine at the time of the Beit Midrash. What about today? So the Torah says, "Al matzah sumrom yoflu." The Torah equates matzah with Korban Pesach, and therefore, according to all these Rishonim, outstanding Rishonim, we have to eat the matzah at the end of the Seder, ala sova, exactly, and this is the matzah of Erev Tochel matzahs, exactly as we would have eaten the Korban Pesach at the end of the Seder. There's no difference because we're equating the two. According to this, there's an obvious question. My friends, when do we make the bracha al achilas matzah? At the end of the Seder? The beginning of the Seder? Makes no sense according to all these shittas. Okay, the Rosh disagrees. But before we get to the Rosh, he's outnumbered. Who here in this room can honestly say that when they make the bracha of al-achilas matzah at the beginning of the Seder, they have in mind the afikomen? Don't all raise your hand. I can't count so many hands. In fact, I'm joking with you. I didn't see one hand go up.
You have in mind the whole...
Excellent. You're a tzaddik. I'm very impressed. Most people are not such great scholars like you, Lawrence. But the truth is, I have to tell you that that's what we really have to do. That's going to mean, Lawrence, that we got to really curtail our discussions on the night of Pesach. We got to keep them on the page of Sifrei Yetzias Mitzrayim and not go beyond. Because what you have to do is when you recite the bracha al achilas matzah at the beginning of the Seder, you have to have in mind the kezayis matzah that you're going to eat at the end of the Seder. So you'll see in the Mishnah Brura, with regard to Marar, in a very strange set of circumstances where he has nothing for karpas, no vegetable other than Marar, that when he eats the Marar for karpas, he makes the bracha, there's a whole sugya in Ari Psachman, he makes the bracha al achilas Marar. He's not going to eat the Marar on the Seder of Marar until much later. Says the Mishnah Brura, when he recites the bracha al achilas Marar, he has to have in mind the Marar that he's going to eat later, and he shouldn't be mafsik, no interruptions in between. The same logic would apply according to all these Rishonim that we mentioned with regard to the bracha of al achilas matzah. The Rosh disagrees. The Rosh says, you know what? If the matzah at the end of the Seder is the real mitzvah of matzah, then we should be eating Marar at the end of the Seder. Al matzos u'marorim yilchu. And b'dochak, and I'm telling you this is a really hard-pressed position, we're going to have to say according to Rashi, the Rashbam, and the Mordechai, that the reason we don't eat Marar at the end of the Seder is because somehow Marar bisman hazeh now at times, since we don't have the Mikdash, and it doesn't have an independent chiyuv like it did we have in matzah, so it's a little bit tough now. It's secondary. So we need to eat the Marar at the beginning of the Seder for the Sibur, and we're going to leave out the Marar at the end of the Seder. Very difficult. Therefore, the Rosh comes to an entirely different opinion. The afikomen at the end of the Seder has nothing to do with matzah. The afikomen at the end of the Seder replaces the korban pesach. When you eat the matzah at the end of the Seder, that matzah is besar ha-korban pesach, according to this zikaron that we have to make. Which is the matzah that we eat for the mitzvah ba'erev tochel matzahs? That's the first kezayis matzah at the beginning of the Seder. Therefore, according to the Rosh's opinion, it's wonderful. We have in mind when we eat the first kezayis of matzah, we recite the bracha to be makayim mitzvah of matzah. The matzah at the end of the Seder afikomen has nothing to do with matzah. That's purely a mitzvah of zecher l'korban pesach. But how do we paskin? The Rosh is outnumbered, and therefore we try to do both. What it means is that we should have kavanah, we should have intention for the mitzvah of matzah twice. First, when we eat the first kezayis, and that's the Rosh's opinion. And secondly, when we eat the afikoman, according to the opinion of all the other Rishonim. More than that, it means that we have to be very careful not to interrupt. When we make the bracha at the beginning of the Seder, we should have in mind the matzah at the end of the Seder. And not only that, how much do we eat for the afikoman? Some people take a little nibble with the afikoman. They break off a little piece of matzah. What happened to all those charts that they give out, where you measure the kezayis? What happened? They got lost in the middle of the Seder. By the time the afikoman, they were too exhausted, or our bellies are too full to eat the kezayis matzah. But my friends, I submit to you tonight, we have to eat a kezayis matzah not only at the beginning of the Seder, but also at the end of the Seder. Wow! Now we're up to 3 kezayim already. Because we had the first kezayis on the shlema, mitzvah mitzvah lechem mishnah. Now we have the kezayis matzah, according to the Rosh, is the ikar mitzvah ba'erev tochel matzah. That's the second kezayis. Now we got a third kezayis, according to Rashi, the Rashbam, and the Mordechai, at the end of the Seder. You've got to have a lot of matzahs. But not only that, you have to have a lot of room in your stomach. Next we move on to Heseva. I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll try to rush through this. The mitzvah of Heseva is to recline. We have to recline on our left side for health reasons. That's what the Gemara says. I'm not sure if the scientists understand that so well. But whatever it might be, we need Heseva. Heseva upgrades the achilas matzah to a level of Sifrei Yetzias Mitzrayim. Everyone has their own favorite Haggadah. I was always fascinated by the title of one particular Haggadah. It's called A Feast of History. And it really is. We're eating history tonight. And we are eating the matzah that we ate in Mitzrayim, and we're thinking and we're imagining that we were avodim to Paro Mitzrayim. We are re-experiencing Chayav Adam Liros Esatzim Kilu Hu Atzmo Yotzim Mitzrayim. So we have to upgrade that matzah into a level of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of feeling and experiencing the redemption from Egypt. How do we do that? So Chazal carved that away for us. Hesed. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, what happens if I ate the matzah without a seba? Guess what? Shulchan Aruch passes you have to eat the matzah again. It's really getting pretty heavy here. So we've got now 3 kezesim assuming that you did everything right. And if you missed Haseba on the left side, now we get another kezayis, it's rough. And the question is, how do we survive this? Keep in mind also that the Torah says about matzah lechem oni. This is a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim, in Parshas Re'eh, and the Gemara says in Psachim Kuf Tes Vav Amud Beis, what's lechem oni? Lechem sha'onim olav dvarim harbe. Again indicating that we have to recite the Haggadah and fulfill the mitzvah of Sibri Yetzias Mitzrayim together with the matzah. The matzah should be on the table. Ba'avur zeh, we should be able to point to the matzah. After we say what we say on the matzah, now the matzah gets a different status. As my friend Rachmil would say, it's a different heft of mitzvah. And that's what we have to eat. So we go through 2 different dimensions of matzah. First of all, matzah is a technical act of eating a kezayis matzah. And secondly, we have to upgrade that matzah to the level of a matzah sheyesh bo kiyum sibur yetzias mitzrayim. And as I eat this matzah, I should have in mind 2 different mitzvahs. I should have in mind the mitzvah of B'erev Tochel Matzahs. And I should have in mind the mitzvah of Lechem Oni Sha'onim Olav Dvarim Harbe. That with the eating of this matzah, I fulfill my mitzvah of Sibur Yetzias Mitzrayim. We have to taste the matzah l'chatchila. B'di'evet, if somebody just gulped it down without tasting it, it's a knapper mitzvah. B'di'evet he was yotzei, but it's not really the way the mitzvah is. If you cook the matzah, by the way, and you completely devoid the matzah of its, negate the matzah of its tam, you're not yotzei, that's not matzah at all. Which leads us to another discussion up and now about elderly people who can't chew the matzah, what do they do? You need a matzah ru'uya l'chimutz, as we said before. You know, certain types of oat matzahs, and other Rabbi Shechter spoke about it at the beginning of the week, are very problematic. You need a seba, and Ani, Lechem Ani teaches us Darko Shalani Beprusa. If one person eats a broken piece of matzah, those are the cheap matzahs that you get from the bakery, because the baker can't sell it, you know, on the market. So that's another dimension of matzah, the Lechem Ani. We mentioned that the matzah has to be integrated into Sibur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And perhaps you remember the story in the Haggadah that took place in Bnei Brak. Who was sitting in Bnei Brak? Anybody remember how many Tanoim of the great giants were sitting together having a common seder in Bnei Brak? I don't know if it's the same Bnei Brak as today, but 5 Tanoim, and one of them was Rav Azarya. Say it out loud. Ben Azarya. I don't get it. From Wed Azarya says that the matzah terminates, expires with chatzos. How can he be Mesapri Yetzias Mitzrayim Kol Osa? The Torah says Ba'avur Zeh. You've got to point to the matzah. There is no matzah. If there is matzah, it's just an object like any other object. How is Rav Azarya involved in the mitzvah of Sibur throughout the entire night? Where was the matzah? And I think the answer might be, based on the Vilna Gaon, that matzah retains its status all 7 days. Albeit not as a chiyuv, it's not compulsory. It may not be a fulfillment of Ba'er Tochlu Matzahs according to Rav Azarya after Chatzos, but what we do have, what remains in our hands, is the mitzvah of Shivas Yomim Matzahs Tochlu. For 7 days we should do matzah. So my friends, I want to wish you all great success in fulfilling this mitzvah of matzah. It's a really tough mountain to climb. And get ready. But I think we could do it. I'll tell you why I think we could do it. It's what I call mind over matter. It means that if you have the right intentions, if you really appreciate that the matzah is this double symbol, on the one hand remembering the affliction of Mitzrayim and the matzahs that the Mitzrayim fed us, and on the other hand the fact that on that night when we left Mitzrayim, lo hispik b'tzeikam shal v'seidah l'hachmid, so it reminds us of the redemption. If we have in mind that through this matzah we are fulfilling a zecher l'migdash of Korban Pesach, that through this matzah we are eating history, we are experiencing the redemption, then in Yirtzeh Hashem, with those kavanas in mind, we should be zocheh to fulfill what is really one of the unique mitzvahs that are still doraisa even in our time for men and women. There aren't that many that fit the bill. And the opportunity to do so is very precious. So let us all hope and pray that we'll see speedily in that times rebuilding the Beit Midrash. We'll eat the matzah not only as a separate independent mitzvah, but also a mitzvah that accompanies the Korban Pesach. At the time of the ultimate Gevurah, the redemption of King Hayomim, the very, very good one.